Crimes like domestic violence and drunk driving have anti-drunk driving and anti-domestic violence organizations and advocates fighting for an appropriate and widespread police response to those crimes. When it comes to animal cruelty, no such advocacy exists. Instead, there are a number of animal organizations falling all over each other in their eagerness to falsely present themselves as the answer to animal cruelty. Anti-drunk driving and anti-domestic violence organizations do not conduct their own investigations into those crimes. Instead, they fight for public law enforcement to respond appropriately and in a widespread manner. The same is not true when it comes to animal cruelty. A number of animal organizations investigate animal cruelty, which they get away with because the victims of those crimes, animals, are voiceless and cannot complain about how ineffective and often harmful are those investigations. Not only are animal organization investigations of animal cruelty highly and usually ineffective and at times harmful, but they give law enforcement an excuse to continue doing little to nothing about animal cruelty. Likewise, token anti-animal cruelty teams, even when provided police powers, whether fielded by a police department or by an animal organization, are also ineffective and do little more than provide larger law enforcement with an excuse to do little to nothing about animal cruelty. Investigations of animal cruelty by animal organizations, when they lack police powers, which most often is the case, are most often worthless and far too frequently provide opportunities for animal abusers and dog fighters to move their animals elsewhere after getting paid a visit by humane investigators. Anti-domestic violence and anti-drunk driving organizations provide the model of what should be done, and which animal organizations and animal advocates refuse to emulate. Victims of domestic violence and drunk driving would never tolerate the exploitation and poor response that voiceless animals subjected to animal cruelty must endure. Imagine if drunk driving and domestic violence were treated the same way as animal cruelty. There would not be a widespread police response. Instead, the few times there would be a response, effective or not, would most often be limited to the few places where anti-domestic violence and anti-drunk driving organizations or police departments had token forces assigned to do the investigations. Calls to 911 would receive the same poor response that calls regarding animal cruelty and dogfighting presently receive. In the absence of widespread police involvement, offenders can easily drive drunk or commit domestic violence, knowing that they will rarely get arrested. All crimes, including animal cruelty, domestic violence, drunk driving, and more, require police to be available at all locations, at all times, day or night, 7 days a week. This is completely not the case when it comes to animal cruelty. Mothers from an anti-drunk driving organization are not out chasing down drunk drivers. There is widespread law enforcement response to drunk driving. It is expected that all of law enforcement must respond appropriately to crimes, including domestic violence and drunk driving. When encountering these crimes, no one accepts the enforcement of drunk driving and domestic violence to rest in the hands of private organizations or token police teams. When it comes to animal cruelty, because animals are voiceless, the complete opposite is allowed to happen. Instead of widespread enforcement, instead of police responding appropriately to 911 calls or when they view animal cruelty or dogfighting, instead you have limited enforcement, which is restricted to the few teams as mentioned above previously. Animal organizations, bottom line, have no business responding or investigating to animal cruelty. All they have done is made it possible for public law enforcement to dismiss and ignore, with very few exceptions, animal cruelty. Public law enforcement, with very few exceptions, has also failed miserably to respond appropriately and in a widespread manner to animal cruelty and dogfighting. A police sergeant that investigated animal cruelty and dogfighting told a number of animal organizations in no uncertain terms that they were harming, not helping animals by their self-serving, often harmful investigations and failure to advocate for appropriate widespread police responses. The organizations and a number of animal advocates were told that if they want to help, they should immediately stop conducting their own investigations and no longer accept limited police responses to animal cruelty and dogfighting. They were practically begged to provide the critically important advocacy that was desperately needed and which still ceases to exist. They were told that if they could help police, by assisting in the transport and housing of animals recovered from abusive situations. If police departments, cities, and other municipalities lacked sufficient resources to provide these services, since none of this perpetuated the seductive lies that they were the ones stopping animal cruelty, which brings them a great deal of money from an unquestioning public, they refused to do anything. None of this is new information. Decades ago, this information was brought to the attention of a number of animal organizations, animal advocates, people in the media, and others. Their failure to do anything speaks volumes about greed, selfishness, and exploitation. Animal rescue, which often means nothing more than ensuring an animal in a shelter is not euthanized, has trivialized animal cruelty by equating real cruelty with humane euthanasia. This has been to the detriment of animals suffering from real animal cruelty. The very people that should be at the forefront of advocacy to ensure animal cruelty is no longer exploited by animal organizations and ignored and ineffectively responded to by public law enforcement, instead turn a blind eye. And so the situation remains in which dog fighters have greater chances of getting struck by lightning than ever getting arrested. Animal abusers are infrequently arrested, even though animal cruelty is an incredibly frequent, widespread, and commonly occurring crime. If animals were not voiceless and easy to exploit, none of the aforementioned would be happening.